Plenty of conversations have been had about the Baltimore Ravens leadership during their 1-5 start to the 2025 season. Well, some Ravens players anonymously spoke on the matter. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this bonus edition here on Saturday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We're 5 days a week here, plus more, with daily Ravens coverage and content. And here we got a little bye-week bonus episode, as the Ravens, of course, have now had a little bit of time to rest and recover. They'll continue that through the rest of their bye week over the weekend, then get back at it in week number 8 against the Chicago Bears. We have a jam-packed episode today, as even during the bye week, this team gives us stuff to talk about. There was a report and an article from the Baltimore Sun, and in this report, in this column, there were a lot of things that were brought up, including some quotes from anonymous Ravens players on the Ravens leadership situation, because in this article, it was a very, very big thing where apparently the Ravens, the title of it is they lack leadership and accountability. So we'll talk about some of the things revealed in this article, stuff we've already talked about on the show, but we'll dive back into it a little bit here. And then in the second part of the show, Lamar Jackson actually in this report was blasted. So that is another conversation we're going to have and about Lamar. And it wasn't just Lamar, it was the veterans as well on the team. But we'll talk about that. And then finally, what I've into if the Ravens should be buyers or sellers. You know, I think it's an interesting conversation. And I think there are some defining moments, especially coming out of the bye week, where it really could determine pretty early on which path the Ravens will take there, whether it be buyers or sellers. So I want to dive into that a little bit as well. But let's start off here with this column from Josh Tolentino of the Baltimore Sun. And the little headline is, some of Baltimore stars have shied away from answering questions about their mistakes. So again, this is stuff we've covered, you know, Zay Flowers skipping out on media, Roquan Smith doing the same thing, like that stuff, which isn't a great look. And again, like we talked about Zay earlier last week after the game against the Rams, and I understand it from Zay's, like he's a young guy. He doesn't want to talk after the games, and especially the ones that you lose, right? That's always tough. You know, if I was a player, I wouldn't want to talk to the media either, but you know, it is a point when then you look at it from the other side of things, and some of these younger players are having to answer for some of the more veteran players on the team. And by no stretch of the imagination is Zay a veteran player. Like for Roquan Smith, I do find it an excuse. Like there's no excuse. And, you know, for Zay, like you can play the youth card, but even still, you know, there are still things to be said about, you know, not a great look here and there. But some players spoke anonymously about the Ravens leadership situation right now, because, you know, John Harbaugh, he was asked about the team's player leadership, and his answer came across with a dose of optimism. Harbaugh saying, quote, "We're going to get great veteran leadership. I believe that, and we're going to have to. Nothing is going to be more important than that." But then Josh, again, who's a columnist over at the Baltimore Sun, I want to make that clear again. If you want to go check out the full column, by the way, you can go check out Josh's work over the Baltimore Sun. There are a couple of players who spoke on the condition of being anonymous about the Ravens situation from a leadership perspective. So one player told the Baltimore Sun, quote, "If you have somebody cursing you out, you'll be super cautious about the next play." Another player said, "You could say, oh, there's no leadership. There's nothing different that's happening this year than last year, besides maybe it's repetitive execution. But it's the truth. You go back to last year, there wasn't guys like Rah-Rah standing up. Roquan Smith got the team going every game, but there's really nothing different in terms of leadership that happened last year that isn't happening this year." So I think it's interesting, that perspective. And again, like the players as a whole have been saying all the right things for the most part, right? Derrick Henry has kind of taken that tune. A lot of other players have taken that to him about, oh no, leadership is good, messaging is getting through. I think Kyle Van Noy's were the most eye-opening about him kind of deferring that question, which he again later clarified. So that's a different conversation. But you have to believe if you're a team, and I've said this over and over again on this show. If you want to win games on the field, you have to figure out what's going on off of it first. And it just feels like for the last calendar year, there have been just weird situations going on with this Ravens team, whether it be weird player sagas like Deontay Johnson or CJ Gardner-Johnson, with some of those, some of the messaging that we've gotten from coaches and players, like the Ravens right now, organizationally, I think a lot of the fan base is questioning the leadership. And guess what? If you want to talk about Roquan Smith, skip a media, Zay Flowers, skip a media, Marlon, like whatever it may be. To me, the leadership it's a direct reflection on John Harbaugh. It's a direct reflection on the top. And that to me is the be all end all here. Because when we kind of hear John Harbaugh speak to the media, it is kind of that like lack of accountability that you get, especially after games, which I think throws a lot of people off. Where, Rashad Bateman, I've talked about his example of taking full accountability. And, especially he took it from a team perspective. He's like, hey, the fans deserve to feel how they feel right now. Like John Harbaugh just kind of takes it in a roundabout way that usually like there's a direct line, right? Point A to point B. And you get from point A to point B. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense to get from point A to point B. Well, John Harbaugh, it feels like you're at point A on some of these answers, and then you're zigzagging all around, you're doing circles and diagonal, all this stuff, you're going back forwards, and then finally you get to some variation of point B that isn't really point B. We've heard him throw guys under the bus this season. We've heard him have weird comments about players. During some of his answers, he's gotten snippy with the media. Like that to me is the reflection, and that trickles down. The stuff that the head coach does trickles down. And again, like John Harbaugh's not Roquan Smith. He's not Zay Flowers. But again, like it to me is a reflection of what's going on at the top with John Harbaugh. And I think that that's frustrating for a lot of people. And again, like the players, they're not going to just, even if everybody could speak anonymously, I'm not sure that, the players would be like, oh no, this is going wrong, that's going wrong. Like, I think that would cause more attention. And, I understand where they're coming from in terms of like, hey, not a lot has necessarily changed in terms of this. And Roquan's kind of hyping us up. But other than that, like from a leadership perspective, this hasn't changed or that hasn't changed. But, you can just see it in the messaging. And I'm not really talking about like player leadership here. Like, I think that players have to hold players accountable. And that's something that Ray Lewis talked about. We talked about those comments last Saturday on our bonus episode for last weekend, where Ray was kind of talking about how the players kind of have to go into a meeting without the coaches and kind of establish something there. And that's not, that doesn't mean, get rid of the coaches and, get rid of their opinions. Just like being able to be on the same page as one another. But I genuinely think that and my question continues to be like, what is the messaging that is coming across here? And when guys skip out on media, it is a trickle down effect. In this article from Josh, this column from Josh, he talked about how, this team with guys skipping out on the media after their loss to Houston. Teddy Buchanan, he spoke after every game this season, but after his post-game session with reporters, according to Josh, when that concluded, he turned to a team official and asked with emotional frustration written across his face, why are they saying it's my fault? We've seen guys stay and answer questions like John Jenkins, Buchanan, Malachi Starks, who's having a struggle of a season so far. So it all to me kind of comes down to that. And Josh put together here in his column that, with Zay, he didn't speak after the loss to the Rams, which got everybody, upset. And Flowers isn't ducking the responsibility on his own. But, for example, like Roquan Smith, he has only talked after wins, and it's only been one win for the Ravens this season. But Flowers has publicly talked twice all season. And again, like media availability throughout sports, right? I think it's an interesting concept. And, do the players like, oh, the media conversations, not when it's not required? No, it's something that is more looked at as a just part of being a pro, right? The responsibility of being a pro, right? They don't necessarily owe anybody anything. And I'm not saying they do, but it's kind of just like built in, I guess, which that's its own conversation of whether it should be or not. But that just is what it is right now. And that to me starts at the top. It starts at the top because yes, John Harbaugh goes and he answers questions and he speaks to the media, but the messaging that we get, like for example, Todd Monken's messaging, night and day from John Harbaugh's messaging, right? Todd Monken, very specific, takes accountability 100%. Like he looks at things from a different perspective, I feel like. And John Harbaugh is just a different message. So, it's an interesting conversation because what you have here in this column from Josh, again, we know that Roquan skips out on media. We know that Zay skipped out on media as well. It's not just like those two that everybody's being like, oh, da, 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 da. But for me, it's a much bigger conversation of like, how can you turn something around when you need to figure out so much stuff, it looks like, at least off the field first. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue looking at Josh's column. We'll talk about what he said about Lamar Jackson, which was very interesting, and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. October 10th was World Mental Health Day, and this year we're saying thank you, therapists. Life can be tough on and off the field, and behind millions of mental health journeys are therapists who showed up, listened, and helped people take a step forward. BetterHelp is shining the spotlight on those connections. We'll also make it simple for you to find support whenever you need it. Therapy moments can be life-changing, whether it's learning to better connect with your kids, healing a relationship, or finding healthy ways to manage stress. And sometimes when things are weighing on you or even weighing on me, taking some time to talk it through can bring clarity and relief. And if you've ever thought about trying therapy, this is the perfect reminder that help is out there and the right therapist can make all the difference. This World Mental Health Day, join us in celebrating the therapists who've helped millions take a step forward. If you're ready to start your own journey, BetterHelp can help you find the right therapist. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less in player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley's rushing for a touchdown near in the game. I love how quick it is. You can make your lineup in under a minute. And my favorite part, PrizePicks just added stacks. So if I want to ride with a player, I can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click. The new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. There's a special max discount promotion live on the board right now for the Golden State Warriors versus Los Angeles Lakers game on October 21st. Steph Curry is discounted to only needing more than half a point to win. Mix and match players in football, basketball, and baseball to build your dream lineup today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the Saturday bonus edition of the show. Even during the bye week, we're doing some bonus episodes and talking about this team because there's a lot that needs to be talked about. We're 5 days a week plus more here on Locked On Ravens. The regular show is Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have bonus episodes like these on the weekend when we got the headlines to talk about. We also do watch-alongs every single game day, live reacting to every single play. We do have instant reaction shows to big news as well as after games. We have Locked On Ravens Squad Show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kaj Ismail. So much Ravens content and coverage. Be sure, again, to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form as well. Let's keep talking about the column from Josh over at the Baltimore Sun. And look, Josh is, he's at the pressers and he's asking questions. Like he is plugged into the team and has a sense of what's going on there from the facility. And Josh was talking about the article title is "The Ravens Lack Leadership and Accountability." Commentary here from Josh. And he was talking about the fact that, Zay hasn't been speaking to the media during losses or after losses for the most part. Roquan hasn't done it at all. after losses. But Lamar Jackson was also a topic of conversation in Josh's commentary here in his column. And I think it's really interesting what he had to say about Lamar. With Lamar, we know he is the de facto leader of this team, right? He is someone that the players are going to look to and even kind of rally around, right? Lamar is someone that the players on the team can look to as that like beacon light. I mean, look at John Harbaugh's doing it. He's essentially saying, "Please, Lamar, save my job again." But apparently, what Josh noticed here, he said, quote, "This team revolves around the two-time NFL most valuable player, but his detached posture on the sideline was eye-opening. When Jackson exited the loss of the Kansas City Chiefs with a hamstring injury, he spent the fourth quarter glued to the bench, disengaged from sideline discussions and huddles. Leadership often is about presence." And then Josh goes on to say, "When the team's biggest, most important veteran voices disappear, intentionally or not, it reverberates. Their disappearance also leaves rookies and even undrafted players standing alone in sparse rooms in front of cameras and microphones trying to explain how a proud franchise has reached this bottom point." Now, I'm not necessarily, like, for me personally, I don't think Lamar is the biggest part of the issue here. I don't, for me, the Roquan stuff, the Zay stuff, that to me is more pressing than anything Lamar has or hasn't shown. I mean, I haven't really noticed anything personally. Again, like Josh is at the facility doing the thing, and he's the columnist for the Baltimore Sun, so he's someone that is also plugged into the team. But this is like we've covered Zay stuff before, we've covered Roquan stuff before, even Marlon stuff before. This is the first I've heard of something like this from Lamar. I mean, honestly, Lamar was getting a little flack for laughing on the sideline. When was it? Was it Houston? Was it the loss to Houston? It was one of the recent losses the Ravens had. Lamar was getting roasted for laughing on the sideline. So again, I'm not personally going to read into that as much here as maybe Josh is. And that's no disrespect to Josh, obviously. Like I'm not going to personally read into that until either like it becomes a trend or I mean, look, Lamar just left the game with an injury. He was probably upset. The game was going badly. I get it. Like, quarterbacks and guys who are injured do stay around the huddle, but other times they don't. And, I don't know. I didn't see any of that. So I can't speak on how Lamar looked on the sideline, but I just think that the more pressing issue is what's going on at the top. And that's what I said in the second part or in the first part of the show, excuse me. And, I just think that is what I want to continue to focus on, because look, I'm not trying to give like Lamar a pass or anything if stuff like that did happen or does happen. I just don't think, to me, it's the biggest pressing thing when, Lamar also has been seen engaging on the sidelines before. And, it varies to me how much, blame you want to put on certain people depending on the situation, right? Like that I understand and that I get. But I think it's a trickle down effect that, Lamar goes up there, he takes accountability when he's healthy, right? He answers questions, he's honest and gives perspective. That to me is how I kind of view Lamar. I'm not going to read too much personally into him being on the bench and, kind of being disengaged, especially after a loss where he had just gotten injured in that game. And that to me was a little bit more of context to that situation. If it was happening again, like if we had heard about Lamar doing that in the Houston game and the Rams game, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh man, Lamar hasn't been engaged for like 3 games or 2.5 games straight, then I think that's more of a storyline, but that hasn't been the storyline. So I'm not really, I don't think Lamar's doing anything wrong here. Like I think Lamar is okay. I think it's more the veterans who are not getting up there and taking accountability and responsibility. It's just a really bad look for them. Like Roquan, I can't stress enough how bad of a look it is for Roquan Smith. Like, for Zay, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, still not a great look, but, at least he's a third-year player, right? And again, that's not like he's a rookie or anything, but still, like Roquan is known as like the other leader of the team, the guy who does rally them and gets a rah-rah in your face type guy. And he's skipping out on losses like that. That to me is that's really disappointing. And Marlon Humphrey, Josh noted in his column, Marlon Humphrey's comments after week 1, where he said, quote, "We're just not mature enough as a team yet." And then, he talked about how at this point, there weren't going to be any repeat offenders in terms of how last year it kind of got to the point where guys were messing up, but no accountability was being taken and guys were still allowed to mess up, essentially, is what I gather from Marlon's comments there. I mean, we're seeing that more, though. I mean, I guess they traded away at Afeowe, and that was their message of like, okay, well, we're not going to let guys do that. Well, there are guys who are making mistakes. Does that mean you have to bench Malachi Starks for a little bit, right? I mean, with Jair Alexander, they have sent a message with him, apparently. I don't know what the heck's going on with him. And, with some of these other guys, you just kind of wonder, like, where does the leadership come from? And that's not me trying to be like snarky. I'm genuinely asking because I don't know. Like, I genuinely do not know. Derrick Henry, I think, has taken a step there and kind of stepped in for the offense. But, defensively, Kyle Hamilton, is he someone that continues to take that step? Certainly, he's someone that a lot of people are relying on for that or should be relying on for that. But, what does that look like? And again, I'm not trying to question and say, oh, Hamilton's not doing it. I just genuinely don't know. Like, I genuinely don't know. So that to me is, what's going on here. And the big consensus feels like there is a big repetitive leadership void and a lot of other things going on. And again, the players who spoke with, spoke as anonymous players, they have their opinions. The media has their opinions. The fans has their opinions. But again, genuinely, I think right now you have to look at John Harbaugh and the rest of it trickles down from there, in my opinion. So, Lamar Jackson can maybe save this team, right? I think it's unfair to ask him to do that, but it's what the Ravens are asking of him to do right now. So we'll see how that all unfolds, but they need to figure it out off the field first before they can have continued success on it. We've seen that. Again, it's just been a weird year overall with a lot of questions when it comes to who the leaders are on this team and the leadership of the coach, if that's even getting through anymore. We talked about comments from Chris Kenny yesterday, which certainly question whether they are or not. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about, depending on how the season goes for the Ravens, or maybe even how this next week against the Bears goes in week 8. Could the Ravens be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline? We'll talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. And the show is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. That's exactly where Rugiet's Go Long comes in. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer. Confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula. The effects can last up to 36 hours, and the process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking on this Saturday edition of the show. Thanks again for being here, making us a part of your weekend here on Locked On Ravens. Hopefully your weekend's off to a good start. We can enjoy some stress-free football here from the Ravens. Again, they're on their bye week. They're resting and recovering, hoping, at least I'm hoping, they're going to have a strong stretch here to get out of that bye week because they certainly need it. So be sure you tell a friend, tell a family member about Locked On Ravens, whether they want a Ravens perspective on something or if they're a Ravens fan that's looking for daily Ravens coverage and content, we have them covered just like we have you covered here. And also you can follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, KOstriker34. We talked about Josh Tolentino's column in the Baltimore Sun, columns for the Baltimore Sun. He had a column in there about the Ravens, their lack of leadership and accountability. And again, I think that Josh's column really opens up an honest conversation about what is going on. Because again, I believe that everybody has a role to play here. Everybody takes a slice of that blame pie. Who takes the majority slice of the blame pie here compared to others? Well, I've made it clear. I believe that is John Harbaugh, but everybody takes a little bit of it here. Players, coaches, executives, everybody. So something the Ravens have to do some soul searching with this bye week, and hopefully they are doing so. So I appreciate Josh opening up the conversation, giving some insight. And again, some harsh words in here from Josh, but honestly about Roquan and Zay, some ones that potentially needed to be had. And, there are so many different arguments about who leads and what does leader look like and whatnot. But, the Ravens need to define that pretty quickly about who the real leaders on this team are. And Lamar Jackson, certainly one of them, right? Certainly one of them. Josh, had his opinion about Lamar. And I think that it's an interesting perspective on it. Again, I think that Lamar is okay. It hasn't become a big story. And, if we had heard about it a little bit more, then I would have been concerned, but we didn't. And I'll give Lamar a pass personally for being upset after being injured. But I think Lamar is the leader on this team. I absolutely believe he is. He takes accountability, goes up there, leads with his play on the field. For Roquan, who is, again, known as the other leader, I think it's pretty disappointing to kind of see how that has all transpired so far this season. So we'll see. But how this season ends up going could define a lot. And I think for me, how this game against the Bears goes after the bye week, that is going to define a lot. Honestly, could push the Ravens in one direction in terms of buying or selling at the trade deadline, because right now I'm not sure if there's really a definitive answer as to which they should be. I have my preliminary answer, and honestly, it's kind of in the middle. And I know people are, Kevin, that's such a cop-out answer. Come on. But I truly mean it. Like what they did with Odafe Owe, to me, even though they didn't get the best value for a former first-round pick, and I get the circumstances. They weren't going to re-sign him. His value was super low because it wasn't doing anything on the field this year. Like, I get it. But those types of trades, I think, are honestly what the Ravens should try to do here, alongside trying to buy. But not buy in the way, because I've honestly, and talking with Q and Sam and other guests I've had, trading a first-round pick this season, especially right now when you're projected to top, your pick is number 3 in the draft right now, which is unreal through a third of the season. This Ravens team having the 3rd pick in the draft. I'm not trading that third. I'm not trading a top 15 pick for anybody right now, personally. Unless it's a generational type talent that will be in Baltimore for the next 10 to 15 years. At this point, you kind of have to try to make a move, maybe for a 3rd rounder, trade a couple of those 5th rounders away. Those are moves I think they should make. But then maybe you do try to trade Mark Andrews in a package for another player that works. Maybe Mark Andrews of the Giants or, another team that needs a tight end. And then they give the Ravens back a pass rusher or an offensive lineman. Maybe Mark Andrews to Tennessee for Kevin Zeitler. Those are the types of deals I think the Ravens should be looking at. I don't think the Ravens should be outright buyers or outright sellers at the trade deadline, at least not right now, right? Obviously, once the Bears game happens, if they win that game by a lot and they're like, oh, okay, they're back, let's go get all these guys in. Or if they lose, it's like, all right, you're 1-6, pack it up, season's over. Then that's a different conversation. But for right now, deals like the Owe deal where you move off of a guy that you're not going to re-sign and you bring in somebody who you feel like fits your system more. And, maybe you get a pick swap in there or whatnot if you want that little Eric DeCosta winning advantage, which, again, I don't think Eric DeCosta personally needs to be so caught up in winning or losing trades at this point, long term. I get it, right? They want every competitive advantage. That you want top down, that trickles down. Eric DeCosta, he wants every advantage. John Harbaugh, he wants every advantage, right? That is a trickle down effect right there, stuff we were talking about earlier in the show. So, again, I think that for the Ravens, their picks right now in the first and second round are too valuable to trade, in my opinion. Like, that doesn't mean tank the season, but you do have to be smart with your assets too, in terms of like what you're moving them for. Again, if we're talking about like a mid to low 20s pick, like, okay, fine, or maybe high 20s pick, fine. Like, that's a different conversation than what is right now the number 3 overall pick in the draft, right? So you have to be smart about it, but you also have to understand that, like, the reason they're in this spot in the first place, because I've said it, and look, I'll talk about how the Ravens roster, I called it the best roster in the NFL heading into the season, but there was potential for it, and I talked about that, for the holes to override what the roster was in most positions. And about every single one that you could get, alongside some just guys performing pretty badly at other positions that were strengths. I mean, it's this perfect storm. I called out the guard position all offseason. And where are we right now? Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees looking terrible. I mean, credit to Voorhees, he looked better last week, but still, it's been terrible there. Offensive line depth, I talked about how you lose McCary and you lose Josh Jones. Your depth, you're going to have to rely on guys, bring in some competition. They didn't do it. And Ronnie Stanley's going in and out. Roger Rosengarten's regressed. Like, that's something as well. Like, the reason they're in this position right now is because of the neglect of some positions that Eric DeCosta has made. And again, I know Q's talked about this a lot with me. Other people are talking about it too. Eric DeCosta is not blameless in this, right? Eric DeCosta, nobody's blameless in this, right? No one gets a pass for this, right? Eric DeCosta's made great moves over the course of his Ravens tenure. Doesn't excuse some of the holes that he let this roster have. And injuries happen. Injuries are things. But, I'm probably overestimated the depth, and I'm fine saying that. I'm fine admitting I was wrong. Everybody's wrong at some point, right? I mean, it's human nature. I thought the depth and the depth behind the depth was so good for this team, and it truly has turned out to just be a lot of young players who need time to develop. Like, it is what it is. I had higher expectations for a lot of these guys, and, they need more time to develop. But that is part of the roster Eric DeCosta put together, which just predicates it on rookies. And it's opened my eyes to how rosters should be constructed, where I love them bringing in guys who, are vets who have been there, done that. Like, I love when they do that. But you also need a balance of rookies. But it feels like sometimes they can swing in one direction or the other, and it kind of messes them up. And it feels like, the Ravens, yes, it's not ideal to be playing like almost your entire draft class right now when they rarely want to play rookies in the first place. But, that's kind of what happens. And, Mike Green hasn't played well. Malachi Starks hasn't played well. The draft class, for the most part, has been a flop. The vets you've brought in have largely been a flop as well. D-Hop has had his moments for sure, but, those guys largely have been flops. So it's been tough all the way around. This team needs to get it together, or else there are serious conversations that are going to have to be had. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, I'm sure we'll have another bonus episode. I'm sure there'll be more stuff to talk about here, as there always is during the season. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.